Should we start or should we
Yes.
kick off immediately or how does it go?
You can start now, no problem.
Sure. So I'll share, we have a small presentation that will walk us through the smart city and smart movement. Please let me know if my voice is clear or.
Yes, it's okay.
All right, so let me start sharing. Can you see my screen? Can you see my screen?
Yes, perfect.
All right, so Bismillah. Let's start. So today we'll be talking about basically reimagining movement. So just a brief introduction. My name is Hassan Rashid, and I work for Ahoy. We're a mobility company and specialized in mobility movement overall. So we're happy to participate today and give you a little bit of what or share some of our knowledge of how we imagine smart movement in a smart city. So we'll start by talking basically what we mean by smart movement. There's a lot of definition out there when it says smart city. A lot of people imagine flying cars, flying trains, things that are just automated or like working almost like a sci-fi movie. While in reality, a smart city is actually the use of the information and communication tools to basically enhance everyone's lifestyle, enhance their workability, enhance the environment, making it more sustainable, and basically provide a more decent life standards to everyone, making it seamlessly integration between all sector of the city. So any city can be smart without the need to have flying cars kind of thing. Now, when we talk about smart city overall, there is a core data element that enable us actually to have a smart city, which is basically data. So data is actually in the source or in the heart of a smart city. Where data come from, where data goes, how we gather data, how we actually utilize those data is basically the main enabler of a smart city. So we'll talk about this in more details. But there is basically a relationship between private and let me just remove this. There's basically a relationship between private and public sector when it comes to smart city. Two has or need to work together actually to create the smart city. It's not a government entity only. It's not a private initiative only. It's a combination between both of them. Now there's a framework has been developed actually to enable a smart city. We have technology like enablers, and this is where the private sector show up, but we actually have city responsibilities. So we'll just walk through the what do you call it, the framework quickly. Just remove this. All right. So what exactly the city responsibilities? What the city needs to provide in order for us to have a successful smart city, quote unquote. So of course, the city, one of the main responsibilities is building the environment. By environment, we mean technical environment, infrastructure, all the low level kind of thing development that need to be taken by the public sector, basically. Oh, sorry, yeah, by the public sector. Energy, telecommunication, transportation, water waste and water management, health and human services, and public safety, and of course the payment. All of those are provided by the city itself. Now, it's not only the providing them, they actually regulate those industries as well. So as a private sector, we need to play those domains, but basically based on the regulation of the city. And as we move to more smarter and smarter city, the regulation get updated. And from there, the private sector can actually innovate and create. Now, when we talk about the private sector, which is not only private sector, but when we talk about the technology side of it, of course, we need tools such as data management, how we manage data, for example, in energy, how we manage the data in telecommunication, how we make it available across all sectors. We need also to be concerned about security and privacy, and this is one of the major concern. The smarter you are, the more tools that you need, the more sensory that you need, the more data you need to gather, the more people are worried about their privacy and security. So you always see those in the movie or science fiction. It's like, yeah, everything is being gathered and being tracked. So that's not the actual reality. Reality is not as scary as that. It's true, there is a lot of data being gathered. There is a lot of information, analytic tools that are happening, but it's not to the extent that we're actually in that scenario that we're being tracked 24/7 and all of our movement. So this is where actually the public or the government sector actually played a role, how to regulate those data, how to make sure those data are actually saved locally in the country, within the border of the country itself. This is one of the first step that we need to take, is to, as we gather more data, we need to make sure we save those data, and those data need to be saved within the country borders. And I believe a lot of cities and countries have already implemented that, and there is a lot of rules and regulation about it. And it's kind of step toward the right direction. Now, this is just a quick overview of smart city and a smart movement, but let's talk about then what we mean by smart movement. So we have an overview of the smart city. It's a city that's connected, and the core is data. So what we mean by smart movement. So smart movement is basically the use of technology, the use of software and hardware technology to provide more convenient transportation, to provide more cost-effective, and of course to provide a safer mean of transportation. So again, does not necessary to be a self-driven car or flying cars for that matter, but as long as we be able to provide a convenient and cost-effective measure, safer tools, this is now we're having a more smarter movement. And usually movement people are concerned about when they talk about is the people movement, how people are moving only, but there is more movement than that. There is movement of information, business entity, they have different type of scenarios of movement, and we also need to cater for that. So we don't want to think of movement as basically just routing or moving from one place to another. There is more aspect happening to movement, and we'll go through them in more details. Please, if you have any question or something, we can take it now, or we can actually take it by the end. All right. So we kind of have an overview right now what we mean by a smart city and a smart movement, but what are the main component that we need? What are actually the basic layers that we need to build to enable us to have a smart city? So since we're talking about movement overall, would be very basic thing that we need at the beginning is basically we need a city map. We need a national city map. Now, cities, countries right now, more often than not, that rely on current available map providers. Of course, every city, they have their own geographical information system, but more or less, when it comes to trying to build a smart application or trying to build smart movement, people often refer or go back to the public maps. Now, there is actually a need, there is actually demand in the market to have a national city map, a map that actually present the city itself, that have its own data, that actually knows the business regulation, knows the government, the rules and the regulation of the city. So we cannot just all rely on a generic type of map. We need to start by building our own maps and embedded those with our data. And that will be the second point. We need to identify where are the data coming from, what data is needed, and how can we obtain it. And this is a section where actually the public and the private can actually collaborate. Of course, public will regulate how the map will get collected, but the private is a great area and opportunity for entrepreneur and for businesses to explore how to actually collect that data. That could be a business on itself alone, managing and collecting data. Now, so we have the map, we have the data, we implemented the data on top of the map. The second thing or the third thing we'll need is actually need frameworks. We need to have out-of-the-box frameworks available for the developers out there, for the public and the private sector out there to start utilizing and innovate. Now, the entry should be as smooth or as easy as possible for every developer, from the student developer to people who are developing for fun and are happy, to a business entity. they need to have enough tools, enough frameworks available for them to start innovating and start actually building the smart city. Now, if every developer or every public-private sector going to build their own framework from scratch, that's years of investment that is not needed. So in order for us to enable others to actually to innovate and to create more and actually provide more application in the market, we need to make those frameworks available for them, and they can take it from there and build the business logic on top of it and deploy their services. Now, the fourth point or the fourth layer for actually building smart movement will be we need analytic tools. So we gather the data, we have the frameworks. What can we do with those data? So those will be used mainly to make decisions and affect the future of the city itself. How we move, where do we build new entities, where we do road maintenance, who's actually following the rules and regulation. If the analytic tools that we can actually build on top of data, on top of those data are actually endless, like the possibilities there is quite endless. We move to an API marketplace, and it sounds very simple as a concept, basically making data and the output of those analytic tools available to the public. So how does public access those information? We kind of need a directory. Every smart city need a directory of all the APIs available. And if you're talking about movement specifically, you should have an API that will tell you, for example, if the traffic light is green or red, sorry. And from there, you can actually build whatever you need to build. There is a demand actually, and we kind of don't know what exactly everyone will build with those, but if we made those API available, if we made those API accessible to the public, of course there will be rules and regulation, but if we made them available, then amount of application that people can develop and the developers, the things that they can create are actually unimaginable, or we cannot cover them all. So that's why we need to make those tools are available, which will lead to the last point, which is basically user application. Now, after we cover all those components from the map to collecting the data, building the framework, analyzing those data, providing an API, here's come the private sector part and actually start utilizing all of those and build a great user application, their application that will be consumed by the end user. So those, what we believe here in Ahoy, that will be the main component on how can you actually enable a smart city, what's the layer are required for you to enable a smart city. Now, sorry. Now, we mentioned the second point there was actually the data streams. So again, at the beginning of the presentation, we said a smart city in the core is data. And we kind of need a lot of data. And today we have a lot of tools. So far, almost all major cities are covered with 5G networks. So we kind of have no reason not to be collecting those data. It just need a little bit of willpower from the public and the private sector to actually start collecting those data. So the data we'll be talking about, for example, traffic sensors. And it's not enough only to know, for example, if the traffic is green or red, but how the traffic is moving, how are actually people are dividing from the highway, to which sector they're moving, how where exactly people slow down and why do they slow down. So all those can be analyzed and then tracked through traffic sensors. Of course, traffic cameras will play a huge role in that as well. We also need more or less all the new vehicles are equipped with great sensors, and those can be fed directly to the national map that we've been talking about. Of course, there is a concern about privacy here. That will be addressed by making those data kind of anonymous, but you kind of need to know how exactly people are moving from home to office to school to hospital, how exactly those movement happening. And it's as small as individual levels, how are each individual is moving, with, of course, the respect to the privacy of those. We also need a lot of building sensor, how many people are entering, exiting, parking sensor to try to understand parking availability and how difficult it is to find a parking in any location, air traffic and how that impact basically the movement inside the city itself. You have some cities that the number of people in the morning are greater than the by huge margin than at night. And I'll take, for example, Riyadh and Dubai as an example. People come in the morning, meetings, a lot of movement happens, and then by night, people start going to the what do you call it, to the nearing cities. We also need to understand how drones are being flight. We need to understand the population. Where do people live? Where do they work? Where do they send their kids to school? Where do they go for entertainment? How exactly are people divided inside the city? Where exactly they are? We also need to understand the geography of each location. If there is a mountain here, if it's a hill, if there is a dip, all those information will actually needed to be embedded in the map that we mentioned earlier. Also, not to forget, we need to talk about the business's location and their operation hour. Now, just imagine if you know where people live, how they move, and where exactly are all business sectors and what exactly their operation hour or our operation overall. If we have all those data together, we can truly enhance how the city move. We can truly provide a smarter city or a smarter movement in a smarter city. Now, this is just an example of the data that you need, more or less, those are the basic example. But the whole concept here is we need to gather as much data as possible, making it available to the public and the private sector, making it available as an API, and then from there we'll see the innovation that will take place. Now, sorry. Now, earlier we mentioned that we need frameworks out of the box available. Now, we believe one of those main frameworks that's needed to be available is an actually smarter routing. We in Ahoy here love this quotation by the great Einstein himself, who says, logic will move you from A to B, imagination will take you anywhere. And we kind of believe in that. So in order for people to actually start imagining and let their imagination go wild, they need the data. They need it to make it available. They need the framework to be available. And from there, we can see where the imagination will take. Oh, sorry. Kind of jump to the end of the presentation. All right. So one thing that's usually been overlooked when it comes to routing technology itself, that a business and individual can both utilize the same type of logic. We always assume that as long as I have a routing engine which can take me from A to B, that's as good enough to work for individual and is good enough to work for business-oriented type of movement. And we kind of think that's the wrong approach to look at it. Individuals and businesses do not share the same characteristic when it comes to movement. More or less, businesses operate hundreds, if not thousands, of vehicles, and those really impact the movement in the city overall. And in fact, it actually impacts us as individual when how the business move can actually enhance our life, even if we're not interacting with that business. So for that reason, we believe there is a need actually for a business-oriented type of tools. Sorry. Now, we also believe there is actually a need for a smart location. Now, of course, when we talk about movement happening between location, and if I have a greater information about every location, we'll be able to enhance that movement and make it more efficient, make it actually a smart movement. Today, again, more often than not, any ping location or any location tools will give you basic information, name of the city, for example, the area or the country, and that's it. If you want to take a business decision, if you want to actually make your application smart, you actually need more information about that area or that location. And let's take an example. Let's say you're a business entity, and let's say you operate in the logistic domain. Knowing that that location have a parking or not will make a huge difference in how do you plan your trip. Knowing that location actually has an elevator that take 20, 30 minutes will actually impact your overall planning. So it's not enough today to have maps that will tell me only, okay, this is Riyadh or this is Sharjah or this is Dubai. You actually need more information. You need more data about every single location. And it can be any type of data, weather-related data, building specific data, infrastructure available. There is running water in that place or not? As long as we provide rich information or rich data about every ping location or every location, we can actually utilize that as developers and software engineers. They can utilize that and develop more location awareness systems or location awareness application that will actually add more value and impact people's life and make their life smarter, and of course make the city smarter. Now, another thing that we actually need to look at it when it comes to the location, and we need to allocate resources basically as close as to people, minimizing the need of actually long trips. Now, how do we do that? There's moving resources and there's static resources. We can't do much about the static resources, that's fine, but there's a lot of moving resources from, for example, fire truck, ambulance, police, or whatever it was. Those all resources need to move dynamically, and they always needs to be in the center or being centered around the city. Now, you cannot just center those basically based on destination only. That's not valid. A smart city actually need to be able to respond as fast as possible. If we're taking, for example, fire truck as example, that fire truck need to respond as fast as possible to any emergency. And you can center it basically saying, okay, I'm gonna have 5 and they're gonna be in those specific center. When you come to plan that, you need to have a dynamic center. And by dynamic meaning they need to move in respect to people movement, in respect to traffic. So where is the center itself can change throughout the day, depends exactly how people move. The center on Friday morning will not be the same as center at Monday morning, for example. So by actually making that information available for public and making it, by building that framework, actually, business can utilize it basically to center their let's say you're a first responder who responds to flat tires, as an example. You're a small company, you need to build that application, but of course you don't have the infrastructure for you to build that. You can build your own map, you can build everything yourself. So if that framework is available out of the box, he will easily be able to utilize that through an API call and basically know where to allocate his resources throughout the day, making his response as fast as possible. So that's one example that you can utilize in the private sector. Public sector as well, as we mentioned, fire truck, policeman, and ambulance as well can utilize such a framework. And we believe this is a very essential framework to a smart city. Now, the second part will be basically smart routing, and we kind of brushed or looked over it earlier when we said that businesses do not move same as individual. We need to build more routing frameworks, and that can actually be taken by private or public sector. That can be or it can be a joint venture between both of them to actually build a more business-oriented framework. There is some framework who actually, or businesses who require a continuous delivery. There is business entity who have operate hundreds and hundreds of vehicles. So if we build a more, let's call it smarter framework, business-oriented smart framework, again, businesses will be able to tap into that without the need for them to build everything from scratch, without the need of them to hire hundreds of geographical information system engineers, without the need to build the whole infrastructure itself. So all that going back to the idea that you need the infrastructure to be ready with the map and with data and the frameworks. And from there, building those framework will enable startups, entities, and public to build on top of it and actually provide a more rich experience. Now, when we talk, excuse me. When we talk about routing, it's one thing to plan the trip. It's one thing to plan the trip from A to B, or you plan hundreds of vehicles trip. But as we all know, that road conditions are not static. Things change either based on individual behavior or based on the road condition itself. Things will change on the way. And we need to have an engine that actually dynamically oversee all of this and basically take an action from there. So you can't just build a trip and move on. You kind of need to build a trip, have an engine that see the trip, see how people are moving. Not only the people who actually have the trip, but actually what's the condition of the road, what has happened, the weather condition. that dynamic engine also need to be integrated, for example, with the city calendar. If there is any specific event happening in any specific area in a specific time of the day, all of those information together will provide us with a dynamic routing that will be able to adapt to changes and enhance or change or react to the changes and basically optimize the pre-planned route. Now, if now we address the smart location, we have a smart routing, and now we actually need a smarter application. Now, today, again, you build your logic, everything's in place, and then from there, when you start navigating, you start using a third-party entity to navigate. Going back to the main original idea that we said, the mobile application itself need to have access to the map that we build. We should, as a city, develop our own navigation system, provide those tools to developers basically to embed navigation inside their application itself. You don't need to rely on a third party. And by embedding that navigation inside the city or inside your application and feed your information back to the city map, is actually enriching the map and enriching the data in the map itself. So it's a circle kind of thing, it's a cycle. You use the map, while you're using it, you provide more data, the map gets richer, you use the map, and we keep going. So that's why we believe that you actually need to empower every application with the right tools, from navigation to data collection tools, to be able to feed that map, and again, the map provide you with the journey. So the overall picture here is we need to empower those end user application to be independent without the need to shift between multiple apps to complete a single transaction or to complete a single journey. Now, we've been talking so far about movement happening that outdoor only, but movement does not happen outdoor. There's a lot of movement happening indoor, inside our hospitals, inside our schools, shopping mall, buildings, how exactly people are moving inside. And that's actually something that we actually need to tap into it as well by providing more indoor analytic tool. And again, we know that the concern here will be immediately privacy. There's cameras everywhere. Are they tracking us? That's already happening. There's camera everywhere for security and safety reasons. But let's utilize those cameras to do more than that. Let's utilize those existing assets to do more than just safety and security. Let's start counting number of people in and out. Let's understand how many male enter, how many female enter the place. What is the average waiting time, for example, in a person waiting for the elevator, or how people move inside the shopping mall. This information or those type of analytic can actually provide you with two things. Data for overall planning, if you're trying to build a different entity, or how exactly you built the indoor experience, but it actually enables you to provide real life feedback that actually make it a smart building and enhance the movement there. So for example, if you noticed the average waiting time for an elevator on the second floor has become 3, 4, 5, you can automatically trigger the rest of the elevators to actually jump to the second floor. You can automate such experience immediately. Now, that's kind of smart movement. You understand people are waiting? Make the asset move to them. Not only use that data to plan future, yes, I need to add another elevator, or I need to install a different elevator here as well to accommodate for this demand. Let's try utilize the existing resources in a more smart way without the need to actually have a huge investment. We already have the cameras in place. And this is a great opportunity actually for a startup and entrepreneur to actually work on actually how we can utilize the thousands and the millions of cameras everywhere to provide more smart movement for indoors. Now, so far we talked about locations, smart routing, smart indoor movement, but we actually need to make the development itself, how people develop those applications, smart. And the way we do that, we already have the infrastructure in place. Let's assume we already have the infrastructure, we have the map, we built all the frameworks, we have all the analytic tools has been built. Let's help people by reducing development time. So a small shop owner does not need to hire a development team or software team to actually to build his system or to build the smart system that he need. We can provide low code or no code at all approach, so people can just drag and drop what exactly the flow they need. If we take the example of the indoor analytic earlier, someone who owns a shopping mall can easily just build that alert system simply by actually using drag and drop tools. You drag if this location have more than average time 10 minutes, send a notification or do something. Now, if we have all the infrastructure in place, the low code or no code approach will become actually a reality. And then from there, people in themselves will start utilizing those tools to actually make their movement indoor and outdoor more smart. And the main motive people will do that is because it's actually provide better user experience and to reduce their cost and their overall investment. So if we made those tools available, we will see a huge adaptation from the public because it really impacts people's life and change the way they operate overall. Now, we'll talk about some application that can be deployed into the city, basically to enable a smart city. So from cleaning to garbage collection to inspection or maintenance inspection to inspection of fines. If let's imagine something. Let's imagine there is a huge camera system on wheels that as it's walking, we can actually collect all those data and basically be able to take an immediate action. So if it's moving, you see a gravity somewhere, it immediately trigger an alarm to someone or to the special authority about it. If we're using all the sensors that we talk about it, for example, in COVID, we have seen that you can't have, or the capacity in certain area has been regulated, so you can maximum have 10 people or 15 people. If you already have those sensors in place, you can actually immediately provide a real life alert that's okay, there's more than 10 people in that location without the need to hire someone to stand outside and actually start counting those people manually. So those type of application and this type of tools, as we mentioned, from garbage collection to fine to gravity to urban furniture and lighting. Lighting itself is consume a lot of energy and resources, and it's actually costly for the city. Now, if we turn off the light simply, if there is no one is there, that's actually a huge tools that actually is cost effective and add a lot of value to the environment, to the city itself by saving cost, and to the experience because we make those life last longer. That's just a very silly example, but this is one of the examples you can actually do if you truly build the framework and the infrastructure, and that will enable you to have a smarter city. Yeah, thank you very much. I kind of hope I did not speak too fast, but that's kind of the overall view about smart movement in a smart city. If you have any question, we can address them now, or you can scan the QR code and we can connect over LinkedIn, and we'll be more than happy to engage in more discussion about smart movement. Thank you. Where is this? So what, anyone has any specific question, or what will be the next step?
شكرا لك يا أستاذ حسن راشد. ونشوف الحضور إذا عندهم أي سؤال تفضلوا.
All right. All right, if there is no question, thank you very much for having us here today. It's our pleasure. And please let's connect, and we look forward to participate in future events.
شكرا لك أستاذ حسن، يبدو أن هناك ما في أي سؤال، ونشكر الحضور اللي ساهم في نجاح هذه المبادرة. شكرا لكم جميعا.
Thank you very